Saints Falcons Week 4 preview with Pro Football Focus, Tampa Bay Trey, and Carmi V. We are here again, PFF. We're going to hear what they have to say about the Saints Falcons. Huge game. Huge. I mean, it cannot be understated how big this game is for both teams. I mean, it really is insane. The Falcons have to reset their season. Like the Falcons right now, if they lose to the Saints, they're 1-3. There's a lot of questions. There'll be a lot of questions. You drop that game at home, Kirk Cousins all of a sudden, a lot of questions coming his way. For the Saints, you kind of have to reset your season because you had two incredible games and then you had a very disappointing game. So now people are wondering what's real. What's real, what's not real. If the Saints come out there and score 12 points again, 9 points again, look stagnant, then all of the bloom will be off the rose. Is that the phrase? The bloom off the rose? That doesn't sound right. Something off the rose. Whatever it is. Put in the comments below what it is. I know a lot of y'all are linguists, so y'all will absolutely know. I think it's the bloom off the rose, though. And the Saints will be in absolute turmoil. I can promise you this, that the negativity and toxicity that will be happening in the Who Dat Nation will be unbelievable if the Saints lose this game. If the Saints go to 2-2, it will be doomsday from the Who Dat Nation. So this is an enormous game. Throw on to that both teams are dealing with a ton of injuries. So, I mean, it's week 4, but this is as big as it gets.
It's coming off a loss that I don't know if a lot of people were expecting them to have, hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. They now travel to Atlanta to take on the Falcons, who have played in a handful of close games already this season. Carmen, when you look at Saints, Falcons, and NFC South showdown, what is your matchup that matters here for this one?
By the way, Falcons, I believe, have the hardest schedule in the NFL right now. Pretty sure it's the Falcons. Over for the first 3 games. It's either the Falcons or the Chiefs. One of those two.
It's got to be Alvin Kamara against the Atlanta run defense, because Alvin Kamara he's still been on a tear. He's 4th in rushing yards, and he's 18 of his rushers have gained a first down. So you got 4 red zone rushing touchdowns too. So in particular in the red zone, this Atlanta defense is going to need to clamp down. And Atlanta has allowed the 5th most rushing yards through week 3. So they're 6th most rushing yards after contact too, I think. And that's very particular to Alvin Kamara, who gets his yards in every way, shape, and form, quite honestly. And the Falcons are also missing tackles left and right. So,
all right, so I would say that the big matchup is the same for both teams. I think the big matchup for the Falcons is their offensive line injuries, how it can hold up. And then the big matchup for the Saints is their offensive line injuries and how it can hold up. Both teams want to do the same thing. Both teams are injured in the same way. So the question is, because when the Falcons lost their 2 linemen against the Chiefs, they were completely exposed. They could not run the football. They could not do anything. When Eric McCoy went out for the Saints were completely exposed. They could virtually do nothing offensively. So both teams have had a week to try and right the ship, to try and figure out, okay, we are going to be down at least 1, if not multiple, offensive linemen, or if nothing else, multiple offensive linemen will be in different positions. So how can we overcome that? And we're going to see which team can do that better. Now, the flip side of the flip side is that each defense would then be in a position to kind of take advantage of that. You know, like what defensive line can take advantage of a weak offensive line? I would argue that the Saints have a better defense than the Falcons. I think that's pretty much agreed upon. I think it's pretty much agreed upon that the Saints defense. Actually, let's go check DVOA. All right, so DVOA. So right now, the weighted rank, it has the Saints as the 5th best defense and the Falcons as the 22nd best defense. As far as pass defense, the number 1, or let's see, Seattle's 1. Saints are 7th in pass defense according to DVOA. Atlanta is 22nd. As far as rush defense, this is kind of the most important one. I mean, they're all important, but New Orleans is 7 and Atlanta is 22. So Atlanta's 22 across the board. So it's not close. Like, it's not close who has been the better defense so far. Now, you could argue Atlanta's had a harder schedule, so it's kind of skewed. Okay. But I don't think the skew is 17 spots. I mean, New Orleans is consensus 5 to 7. So we'll call it 6. And Atlanta is consensus 22. So I don't think it's that much of a divide. So defensively, if your question is which defense can take advantage of the injuries on offense, the answer has to be the Saints. The answer has to be New Orleans is in a better position to find success on the defense. Like, if we look offensively, and this is going to be, I have less faith in these numbers because they're so, like, I don't like there's so many outliers. Like, the first 2 games for New Orleans are obvious outliers. The last game is an obvious outlier. The Saints are not either of the 2 data points. The 2 data points being 45 points per game or 12 points per game. They're not either of those. So this is going to be completely, I think this data is completely useless. Like, New Orleans is 4th overall. They are 6th in passing and 5th in rushing. Okay. So, and let's just see real quick where Atlanta is. Atlanta is 14th overall. They are 15th passing, and they are 17th rushing. So DVOA wise, like, this is an obvious advantage to the Saints. Strictly DVOA, which, you know, is 3 games enough to really put full stock into DVOA? Probably not. But it is something. So it kind of answered our question where right now, who has proven at least that so far this season, who can run the ball better? Saints have than the Falcons. Both are dealing with the same injury, so it kind of negates each other. Whose defense has been better? The Saints. Whose run defense has been better? The Saints. So just looking at that, I would say that the Saints are the team out of the 2 who can take advantage of the same issues.
So, and not defensive tackles, like, they are just not tackling well so far this season. Clarification here. They are just, it looks sloppy and it's not tightened up at all. And I guess this isn't a chance to do that again against a division opponent. But I have to think that if Kamara can kind of do what he needs to do all over the field, that the Saints are going to be just fine, and they're going to start putting those numbers back up instead of what we saw last game.
Yeah, I think that they really obviously wanted Kamara to get going against the Eagles, and they just were not having that similar success. The Eagles defensive line really stepped up last week. But for as much as people want to talk about Clint Kubiak and Derek Carr, this is a team that wants to win on the ground. That is how they want to establish.
That Clint Kubiak has said that. Like, that is the biggest misnomer. The biggest misnomer between, like, people think that, like, the offense, people for some reason believe, like, Sean McVay, they believe all these teams, even Miami, like, they believe these teams are just pass happy offenses. That is not the case. Most of these teams, if not all of them, of this tree, are run-based teams. They want to run the football. It is a running, foundationally, it's a running first offense who then, off of the run, does play action, these, like, super short, super quick, efficient passes. That's all it is. San Francisco, Miami, the Rams, they all do the same thing. Like, Miami last year, Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane had, 2,000 yards rushing combined? Like, it's not a team that's just 5 wide, spread it out, let it rip. It's not what any of these teams do. The 49ers, not what they do. The Rams. Sean McVay is, like, the most run-happy, run-first guy in the league. Happens all the time. Happened with Todd Gurley. It's happening now with Kyron Williams.
Establish their offense. So you are very right to point out that Kamara.
I mean, Derek Carr's throwing for like 200 yards a game. Like, even in the blowouts, it's just like, I think people are trained or are used to for the last 10 years or so, like, good offense is synonymous with good passing or synonymous with, like, the air raid or spreading it out. And that's just not true anymore. Like, that, it's not synonymous. This is a long time now. This is a long time now that we've seen. I mean, since McVay kind of took over with the Rams, it's kind of shifted to this new style of offense, like the Lions. The Lions are probably the best offense in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL. They are a run first, control the line of scrimmage, play action pass. Like that is what they do. Jared Goff is not getting back in 5 wide and just letting it rip.
And how he does versus this Atlanta run defense is going to be a really important one. That's kind of my plus factor, so I'll get to that in a second. But my matchup that matters in this one, Chris Olave versus AJ Terrell, right? I'm hoping that we get quite a bit of this, because when we talk about single coverage specifically, AJ Terrell coverage stats in single coverage this season, he's played 31 of those snaps, 5 targets, 3 catches allowed, 57 yards, 2 catches have been for a first down. So it's like, okay, he's done okay. He's not been locked down in single coverage situations. On the other side of things, though, when Chris Olave is going up against single coverage against a singular corner, I guess I could also say safety, but he's not really matched up against a safety. 92.0 PFF receiving grade versus single coverage, which
Olave's been nuts. I mean, let me show you all another stat. This chart right here, 2024 wide receiver play from Judah Fortgang using PFF's data. At Throw the Damn Ball is his Twitter account here, giving credit to the graph. But you can see y-axis is the catch point and yak grade. X-axis, don't be ashamed, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be nervous. Don't be scared to death. Y is up and down. X horizontal. Okay, I know. X is raw PFF separation grade. Look at Olave. Like, he is best in both by quite a large margin. Malik Neighbors in the middle has had one hell of a year. Nico Collins has had one hell of a year. Like, there is no doubt about it what Chris Olave is doing. He is as high as it gets in catch point and yak grade, and as high as it gets in raw PFF separation grade. So this is another thing. Like, it's so funny that after the first, I think, 2 weeks, I was hearing like Chris Olave is not playing well. Remember that? I remember because he had 2 targets or 2 catches on 2 targets that people were like, Olave's kind of absent. Olave's not really impactful. And we were saying like, it's not just all about catches and yards. But yeah, if anybody can take advantage of Atlanta's secondary, it's Chris Olave. So just goes to show how good Olave has been.
Is the 6th highest mark amongst wide receivers. So sort of advantage Chris Olave there. Do we get back to that for the Saints? You talked about, okay, you normally want 4 weeks to really understand what a team is going to do on offense. And if Olave is able to have another really great day, if the Saints are able to get on track passing wise with all that efficiency, well, then we've got a 4-game sample size, a 3 out of 4 games, very efficient for this team. But to echo off of your point before I get your plus factor, my plus factor is Grady Jarrett. It is one of those defensive tackles for the Atlanta Falcons.
Okay, now we're getting to the actual matchups that matter. The actual matchups that matter is both teams have an obvious weak point, and so which team can take advantage of that weak point?
Because I just don't know really who's getting after the passer. And what we saw the Eagles have success with against the Saints last week was Jalen Carter, right? Jalen Carter was able to manhandle Cesar Ruiz, who's on the injury report for the Saints. I don't know if he's playing for sure because his status is unknown. But anyways,
yeah, I'm not filming this on a Friday, so we're still kind of up in the air on who exactly is playing. The only person we know for sure that's not playing is Eric McCoy for the Saints. We know these hombres, let me go check this again. We know these hombres right here. Drew Dahlman, he was put on the IR, and Caleb McGarry. Caleb McGarry is still, as of right now, that he's still like questionable, but I would doubt he plays. I mean, he strained his MCL. It'd be hard to imagine McGarry playing. So as of right now, I would think McGarry and Dahlman for sure, but I don't think McGarry's not playing either.
If it's depending on what the interior offensive line is going to be, because Lucas Patrick moved from one guard spot to center after Eric McCoy went out. He's going to miss some time. He's not going to be back into this one. But interior offensive line for the Falcons, for the Saints, was an issue last week.
Yeah.
Can Grady Jarrett, who is supposed to be the best pass rusher that the Falcons have on that defensive line, can he be that plus factor? Can he have the best game of his season so far? Because even though he's the best at it, Carmen, it's just an 8.3 pass rush win percentage. It's just a 64.9 pass rush grade. So it's not like he's a world beater. The rest of the team's just not great. So can he?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's one thing to say, like, oh, we have blank player, which I'm sure is going to be a lot of response from the Falcons fans. It's going to be, oh, we have Grady Jarrett. But then it's going to be like, okay, well, this is his production. And his production is not nothing to write home about. So that's another thing you have to kind of take a look at is, like, you're going to hear a lot. You always hear players, like, that's like the Stephen A. Smith. The Stephen A. Smith is when they just read out the roster. And it's just like, oh, well, they have player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4. And it's like, okay, that gives you no context to how they're doing, what their efficiency is, what their success rate is, or any of that stuff. So, just because they have Grady Jarrett doesn't mean that the production has been there. So for the Saints, you got to hope that the production will not be there again.
He step up. That's got to be my plus factor in this one. Who is your plus factor for this match?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have an opportunity because my plus factor is the Saints offensive line, just given the the rash of injuries they're dealing with, the amount of guys that are out of position. Eric McCoy going down. I mean, I would argue that he's probably your best offensive lineman, and he is not.
Yeah, definitely the most important. Like, you could argue Tulisi Fuaga has been really, really good, but the fact that McCoy's the center, the fact that he controls the protection, like all that stuff, he's definitely the most important offensive lineman for the Saints.
Now on injured reserve. So you're not going to have him for the foreseeable future. That does put, like you mentioned, Lucas Patrick back in at center after playing guard. And I think Chicago will remember that Lucas Patrick kind of was a better guard than he was a center. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those things where if you have you don't have continuity along the offensive line, that's going to trigger a lot of different things for your offense. The good news for the Saints, though, is Derek Carr is still very good under pressure. So
my concern is more about the continuity. My concern is more about players knowing what they're supposed to do. This offense is very intensive when it comes to everyone having a role, everyone having a job on every single play. When you start shuffling people around on a moment's notice or a week's notice, you can lose some of that efficiency. First couple of weeks, we saw, the most crisp, the most perfect execution on every play. Does that drop once everyone's out of position?
He is being pressured. He has the second best passing grade while under pressure of anybody in the league, which he's probably going to need when you talk about this matchup and as the Saints go forward, given the fact that their offensive line just isn't what they wanted it to be, which is really awful given the fact that I think they had finally figured it out. You have Trevor Penning, on the outside there doing so well, and he finally turned the corner that you wanted him to turn. This was a line that looked like, oh, they figured it out. This was like they were operating in Clint Kubiak's new offense very, very well, opening things up both in the run game and protecting Derek Carr. It is really unfortunate that this all had to happen kind of simultaneously. And I do think that you lose the anchor of your line in that center in Eric McCoy, and there are bound to be problems.
Yeah. You talked about how well Derek Carr's been playing under pressure. He hasn't always played well under pressure throughout his career, but confident this year, really confident, knowing where to go with the ball when he has even been pressured. But like you mentioned, this might be.
Yeah, Carr's talked about it before the first couple of weeks that the touchdown passes to Shaheed early in the season, he's under pressure when he's making those throws. But there's a trust in Shaheed and the route and all that stuff. You see against the Eagles, the interception at the end, total miscommunication. Shaheed was not looking back for the ball. They just weren't on the same page. And that's kind of a microcosm of exactly what I'm talking about, where in an offense like this, when the execution starts to waver because of either people in different positions or because of just some overall confusion, you can see how quickly that efficiency and success falls off.
His toughest test yet. He might have more pressure than he's even used to from the early parts of this season. So that's obviously what the Saints are, because it was such a strength for them in week 1 and week 2. Whatever that Saints offensive line looks like, that's going to be a telling tale and absolutely can be a plus factor here.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So I was trying to find the DVOA number. Usually in the past, DVOA has had a offensive line grade. I was trying to see how good an offensive line is or some of that, but I can't find it right now. But I did see the defense versus receiver, which is kind of interesting. So this is how good your defense is versus wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. The Saints are 3rd in the NFL against wide receiver 1s, which goes to show Marshawn Lattimore how good he is. The Falcons are 22nd against wide receiver 1. They are 2nd in the NFL against wide receiver 2s, which is interesting. The Saints are 20th against wide receiver 2s. So this is kind of an interesting number here. Also, if you want to see the game projections from DVOA, which shouldn't be surprising after what we just saw, but they project the Saints to win 24, we'll call it, to 21. So they have the Saints as winning this game by 3. So now certainly is not guaranteed because they're not factoring in, like, DVOA doesn't factor in like injuries or things like that. DVOA just factors in what's happened already. So it is skewed a little bit for sure. You have to factor some of that stuff in. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this game. If you're ready, if you're nervous, and I will see you in the next video.